So picking up today, it's Friday. We've been working on materials all week. We've been learning about how to set our file paths. And so let's take a look at the assignment in Google Classroom and make sure we're on the same page on what you're going to do. It's about customization today. So the standard tutorial is going to have a student go through and get exposed to concepts such as combining a bitmap or perhaps a gradient in a variety of ways to make a material for use in a 3ds Max scene. The starting point comes from the 2017 version when there was a different variety of materials, rendering engines, and the combination makes the default scenes look kind of weird if you just open them up in the 2021 version. So there's an option to convert it using the Arnold renderer, which is what I suggest. Now we played with the art renderer for a little bit with physical materials, and I want you to have the experience of dealing with a number of render engines and material types because it all comes into play with how you render out your final scene. You're going to learn by doing, so my goal is to get you hands-on in the lab working on this. But we're going to look at some samples from the past and talk about what some samples were. Now I'm letting you open the final version, especially if this isn't really like going real well for you. You've got some challenges with your schedule, whatever's going on with you. I want to work with you from wherever you're coming and position you to have some positive experiences here. This is almost the standard version of the tutorial. And the student has put their name in the scene, so we can tell Jerry did the work here. And we can also see, if we look in the upper right-hand corner, that the camouflage pattern that's on that set of boxes was customized. It's not the standard version. So there's some customization, and you can tell that Jerry did the work. If anybody else tried to turn it in, I could say, oh, why does Jerry Green's name in the middle of your work? And to be honest, these students may have gone through the whole tutorial and then done customization. I don't mean to cast judgment or anything like that. I'm saying that was possible. Now, in this example, we can see a lot more customization. A couple of Jeeps have been lined up outside like another student. However, they've also radically changed the camera angle, created a new camera as though the perspective was coming from the Jeep. They've added their name on the inside, which is probably part of painting on the texture, something we've done often when we're in person. Looks like their logos on the back of what they call the jerry can on the back of that Jeep there, the water jug. Actually, that could be fuel, actually. Probably, I don't know. I guess they could probably carry either one of those containers. It's kind of academic for this conversation. But they do have a particle effect. They've got a snow, which is a helper in 3ds Max. And they've taken this a little further than the standard version. Grace brought in her tank that was already linked, and she added some materials on that, as well as an emissive one that almost looks like a searchlight on the top of the turret there. And this one's probably the one that shows the most storytelling possibility within a scene. The snowman he created and linked has been brought in a couple different instances. One of them is driving the tank he did. The vehicles have been more or less repositioned to indicate an action sequence. And he's even added a projectile like a snowball hurtling from the cannon being fired from one tank towards a Jeep. And the whole effect, with their name included, it says a lot about the student. Now, this is an important image to hold on for a minute. When you copy, actually, when you open the starting point from our tutorial files, you're going to want to save your copy on your H drive. And where a lot of confusion's been coming in is making sure that your autosave doesn't refer to the iDrive. That's controlled by the project settings. And so what you would do is when it's open, and as you've done a save as to your H drive, you're going to want to click on the word file. I'm going to use the corner of the box over here to kind of indicate. You're going to click on file, come down to project, slide down where it says configure the configure the project paths. The box that comes up should show you the letter H, 3ds Max. And so that's going to include everything in your scene, except you may have external files. And if you look at this little tab here, you can click on it, and that should point to the tutorial files where the other images are. So this is a process you're going to go through every time you open up a scene from the tutorials file. You're going to check that path. Any questions about that? I'm watching chat. I'm going to pause this for a minute. All right, so that's all from the Google Classroom. Whatever you're done with today, should be turned in. And so if I look at student work from an earlier session, I will see that people have turned in some rendition of whatever they were working on, ideally with their names on it, and hopefully some customization. You can set up an environment map. Yeah, this one's clearly got some customization in it. We can see a variety of things have been put in here. Okay, we got the name, we got the tank brought in, got another object over here. This looks like their plane. Yep, that's the plane that they UV wrapped earlier in the week. And a couple of Jeeps. So there's some examples there to indicate that. Just trying to celebrate student successes. Again, we've got a student name. We've got a couple of tanks. We've got the plane from earlier. Yeah, there's been a few customizations on that one as well. So the thing is, with your name and or logo in there, people should see that you've customized it, that it's not the standard version. You can always get back into these. And the process of going through the Army compound is actually designed to help students learn processes that they can use in their own work, right? We're doing this as an exercise. So by doing File Open, even though I've got a shortcut to it, now this is my own H drive, which is probably where you saved your last work. To open up something from our tutorials area, you're going to go into a different drive called the Game Programming Drive. It's also known as the I drive. I as in I can only read there. You can't really write from there. Then I touch the letter A on the keyboard, which brings me to Art. Then I touch the number 3 on the keyboard, which brings me to 3D. Then I touch the letter T on the keyboard, which brings me to tutorial files. We want to use the more recent version, the 2016 version. Now, even though we commonly refer to this as the Army compound scene, this is actually part of materials. So when we look under scenes, which is where our scenes file will be, the topic we have is called materials and mapping, and this is an introductory one. So we're going to look into intro materials. Let's click on this by date modified, and you'll see I've got the completed version indicated. I updated it with Judged 2020. So when conference for up to 7 days, oh no, actually it did come up with this. Good. So now I've opened a scene that's not compatible with the Art render because it's an older version. What I want to do here is change the current preset from Art to Arnold. The Arnold render will let me use OSL, or Open Shaded Language, which is going to give me a lot more control over my materials. Then I'll click on the word Convert Scene. Fairly quickly, the progress meter jumps up. It's done, but it doesn't close itself. So we'll close that. Now that I've converted it, and by the way, you wouldn't be able to convert it until you do a Save As. So I just reminded myself. Once you've got it open, you're going to want to do a Save As. And you're going to want to save it on your own H drive. So everyone's H drive out there has got their student ID number. For me, I don't have that indication, but I do know it's the letter H. I'm going to go into my 3ds Max folder, which you should have as well. And that's where I'm going to save it. And I'm just going to add S2 at the end for session 2 because I'm doing this as a demo for session 2. So now that I've saved it on the H drive, I can actually do that conversion and save my work. If I converted it and I went to save it, it'd be like, oh, you can't save it, dude. You're on the I drive. How do you know what drive number you're on? That's what that little image was for. We're going to click on File, go to the project, and we're going to check this option that says Configure Project Paths. We want to verify that what we're looking at here is the H drive. That's good. We can write there. We're also going to click on External Files and make sure this makes sense. It's pointing to our game programming drive. If you make any adjustments here and you click on OK, your screen might turn white for a minute because it's reconfiguring the network paths. It's normal. It's not a crash. All right, so now I'm in this scene just in a perspective view. I'm going to click here and go to one of the cameras just to again remind you that there's 3 different cameras that are already in the scene. Camera 1, 2, and then camera 3. Having cameras in scenes is something we'll also do in the Unreal Engine, and you can add a custom camera as well. Before you get too far, make sure you check your render and make sure that you get some understandable, usable results. As a reminder, holding Shift and Q will give you a quick render. I'm going to just close out and not worry about, there was a message about a map type not being supported. I'm not going to worry about that. This is a decent render. I can see what's in the scene. If you can't see what's in the scene, there's two areas to check. First one would be your environment settings. I'm going to touch the number 8 on the keyboard to bring up my environment settings. 8 as in the number of legs on an octopus. All right. Notice here it says automatic exposure control. It's possible that you're using physical camera exposure, and if you were to render it, it's not going to give you the same results. It's going to look more washed out, for example. So that would be one to make sure that you're actually set this to automatic. The other thing is that you can add a background map. So if I click on Process Background and Environment Map, I also want to set an environment map. Click on the word None. This could be as simple as a gradient. Grab a simple gradient and use that. This is an OSL example because the engine I'm using is Arnold. And if I render that, you're going to notice that this color gradient becomes a background image, which is pretty trippy. You could use an actual image as well for your environment map. I just wanted to remind you, you can use an environment map. That was just a random version I grabbed. You could also use one of the HDR or HDRI, as some like to pronounce them. The high dynamic range input files are available to you on the Classroom drive as well. So you get to that for the high dynamic range libraries. This is the path for you. It's under Art, 3D, Squiggly Materials, and then HDRI. So if I were to copy that path, I'm going to paste it into the chat for you. If you want an environment map, there's some HDRIs. I also might have one in a folder called Army Compounds. Let's see if we do. Yeah, we might have an HDRI out here as well. By the way, you'll notice in here there's a lot of the tutorial material files are out here, including some UVW maps for characters. These all relate to. So I believe there's some HDRI images out here. Okay, there was one. Targa. One problem with the HDRI images is you're not necessarily going to be getting a preview of them. All right, I don't want to belabor the point. There's the source. That was the main reason I wanted to get in there to show you. All right, so now it's been saved. If you decided you wanted to bring in another object, one last point, render. Let me back myself up. In addition to doing open, save, convert, check your environment settings, which is the 8 key. We want to check our render settings. You can get there by pressing F10, or if you don't have an F key, the teapot with the little gearbox next to it. For Arnold, which is the render engine I'm suggesting you use here. So as we're using Arnold, I would suggest you change this from production to iterative. Remember, if you don't set this to a camera for your render, whatever your viewport happens to be will be the source of your render. Okay? You can save your output just like we talked about in other ones. That is near the bottom. I'm on the Common tab here, and I'm going to scroll down. When you put your mouse over a part without buttons, it becomes a hand, and you can kind of click and push up. And if I want to save the output, I do so by clicking on the word Files here, and I tell it where I want to save it. This will make sure that when you render out an image, you get a version you can turn in. You don't have to do a save or use a snipping tool for it. So if I didn't cover this with you before, as you might imagine, you want to save it on your H drive. And you can give it a name of your choosing. I'll call it Army Compound Submission. Doesn't matter to me what you call it. Now, if you were to choose PNG, you might find the environment map doesn't show up because it's considered transparent. So you could go with the JPEG. Now, when you set this up, depending on what version, it's going to give you some options on the quality. It's for your portfolio. You decide what you want to do. So now when I render this, not only will it render it to the screen, but it will also save the results into a file for me that I could turn in. Obviously, this one hasn't been customized, but that's the setup in case you want to start with the standard that's been completed and update it from there. I'm here to help you. I'm going to turn you loose in the lab. I'll be watching chat. I'll be seeing what's on your computer screens. Make sure you're on your assigned workstation. Make sure that when you log in that you check Google Classroom and use chat to let me know what questions you have. This is the same tutorial that we started on Monday. So if you didn't get it done on Monday, you've got more time to spend on it. But if it's been a busy week for you, I'm positioning you where you can take the final version and then focus on what I consider to be the fun and rewarding part, making it your scene and customizing it. Hope this is a good project for you. It's one of our Friday admiration ones. I'm going to stop the demo and I'm going to keep talking to the students that are online.